Hey everybody, welcome to the Let's Talk live show. And today we're actually going to be having a fun one. It's a video I've wanted to do for a very long time, and I decided, you know what, doing it live is probably the best. I am going to be counting down worst to first, the best Tony Scott films ranked. So Tony Scott's actually directed 16 films. Tony Scott, if people don't know, is the younger brother of Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott is one of the most, famous directors of all time. The guy's directed, Blade Runner, which is in my top 10 favorite films ever. And then Alien, it's creeping into my top 10. And I absolutely love Alien. But I've always been a big Tony Scott guy. It's one video I've always wanted to do. I want to talk a little bit about Tony and give him the love that he's probably never gotten. What's up, John Doe Juggalo? How you doing, buddy? Jeff's here, guys. Jeff, glad to see you, man. Glad to see you made it. Make sure you guys are subscribing to John Doe Juggalo's channel, whether you're watching it live or watching on the replay. But yeah, today we're here to celebrate Tony Scott. This guy, he's directed his first film in 1983 with The Hunger, and then his last film in 2010 with Unstoppable. Then he tragically passed away. He took his own life in 2013. Very shockingly, I actually remember I was at work when I read that. Just kind of came out of nowhere, he directed his last film only a few years before that, and just kind of didn't expect that. This is a guy who, kind of a big part of my life in a lot of ways, in a lot of weird ways, because Days of Thunder is a movie that has been a part of my life since about 5 or 6 years old. I've always loved that movie. It's, well, you'll see where it ranks in the list, but I've always enjoyed that movie, and I've always enjoyed the sloppy cheese. What's up, Mr. Smelly Potato? Nice to see you, man. The one thing with Tony Scott is like a lot of his movies, they might not ever hit the highs like his brother with like Blade Runner and Alien, where they're very thought provoking and the production design is absolutely incredible. No, Tony Scott's much more, he's a cheesy kind of guy, and I always like a nice big slice of cheese on my movies, and he's always there to do that for me. But he's also gotten his hands on some great scripts. He's also a very stylistic director. He worked a lot with Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, Jerry Bruckheimer and Don Simpson, the two of them, the two big producers again until Don Simpson's death in 1996. They were huge producers of a lot of great movies that and of course they eventually started to produce movies for Michael Bay as well. And Tony Scott's kind of like that precursor to Michael Bay. He directed these big cheesy action movies, but a lot of times he also ended up with some just fantastic scripts, liked some movies to end on a happy note for the most part, even if it was bending over backwards against what logic was. But still, what's up, Shamrock Balls, aka David, the co-host of the Let's Talk Movie podcast, which we'll have a new episode of that out tomorrow, guys. Psycho 2, looking forward to that. John Doe Juggalo said, I just watched Top Gun in 3D a few nights back. It was great. You have the camera set up on a different angle. Yeah, just kind of on an upwards down angle. I'm trying to light these better if I'm going to be doing this. The thing that really sucks, though, is that window right behind me. Every wall has a window on except for the one with the shelves. So, and if I can't quite turn the camera because then you'll see the door. So this is kind of the best I can do using a webcam. So, you get a kind of a good look of the shelf. But yeah, it's a little bit different. I'm trying to use this on our show eventually. Do you think it looks good? Oh, it does. You said it looks good. Thank you. What's up, Dark Room Reviews? Make sure you guys subscribe to Dark Room Reviews as well. Great guy, great channel. But yeah, nice to see you guys turning up on a Thursday night to talk about some Tony Scott movies. So, we're going to get into some, obviously, a lot of Denzel movies are in here. It's always weird. Denzel kind of always hooks himself up to a good action director. I think that's where he has his most fun, is in these action movies. I sound good to you guys, by the way. Sometimes with this mic, it can be a little bit off, but I think I got it set up in a good way. But just to keep the conversation rolling, I guess we'll get right into it with his last film. 16 of these he directed. He's directed a couple short films. I'm not going to be including them. These are just the films that he's been, known to direct. That's it. Feature-length films. And we'll start it off with 2005's Domino. And Domino, in my opinion, is the worst by far. Thanks, Mark's Movie Menu. I appreciate that. Thanks for letting me know the audio sounds good. Yeah, this is the only movie of his that I can honestly say is almost unwatchable and is actually genuinely bad. This is one where it's the style of the time that I think drags the entire thing down. It could be a very interesting bounty hunter story. What's her name is the lead in this? I always forget her name. Keira Knightley? Yeah, Keira Knightley from she's most famous obviously for the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but you also got Mickey Rourke in this movie, just before he got big again. So, got some actors popping up in and out there who are recognizable. Tony Scott was always able to nail down big name actors, which is impressive. I guess guys liked working with him. But yeah, he got Keira Knightley in this one. You get Mickey Rourke, plenty of actors, and Delroy Lindo is in this as well. He just always got these actors to play like small roles. Christopher Walken's in it one year after he did Man on Fire, and I think he was out after that because Domino. Ugh. Keira Knightley, geez, remember her? LOL. And in this movie, Shamrock Balls, she is like playing just the most stereotypical, like, I'm too cool for school kind of character. This movie, first of all, in the worst way of the time, objectifying women to the point like it's taking you out of the movie. Like the plot of the movie is just, it could be interesting because you guys remember the show Dog the Bounty Hunter. Clearly, this was like playing on that. It was cool to be a bounty hunter at the time, but we got this ragtag group of people who are bounty hunters. They're all just walking stereotypes. And then, of course, the way it's shot is very much of like 2004, 2005. If you guys remember Saul with those like really crazy edits, the oversaturated image to where it's just like so ugly to look at. And that's what you have in here, which is crazy because in the 90s, Tony Scott always had like these beautiful shot films that like took place in the magic hour with the sun setting and like how the camera like would go like purple to orange, like at the top. It looked absolutely beautiful. But with Domino, it's like he just went completely the other way and was trying to like, I guess, modernize his films. And I guess he realized like that wasn't going to work because he kind of kept the style a little bit, but toned it down a lot for his last couple of films, like in Deja Vu, Unstoppable, and Taking a Pelham 1-2-3. Like his last few films kind of had a similar style, but this is just too much. It's too much style over substance. It just does not work. The plot is just very uninteresting, and I gotta be honest, I hated every moment of watching this movie. There was just nobody in there, and the acting, even Keira Knightley, is just not that great at all. She's the lead, so it's hard to get behind the movie with that. So I had to put Domino last, and this was actually the only one of Tony Scott's films I hadn't seen before this. Would it have worked better for me in 2005? Well, I was 13 then, and there was a lot of shots of women, and you know what, 2005, John, absolutely would have loved that. So I mean, I still love it, but I'm just saying, like, I would have been into this more because of the teenage mindset and not actually the actual plot of the movie. Going to the movies then would have been a lot more fun. But that's really the only thing I can take away because the movie itself just really was not that good. And that brings me to his next one up. Spy Game from 2001. You'd think this movie should be great with the cast in there. You got Robert Redford, who's the king of espionage films in a lot of ways. He's a handsome, charming guy, one of the most good-looking guys of his generation. Then you get on the other side, Brad Pitt, probably the most handsome, good-looking, known actors of the time, especially in 2001. This is the same year as Ocean's 11, which is one of his most iconic roles. And I love him in this movie. I love Robert Redford in this movie, but this is just another one where the plot of the movie is just not interesting enough, especially when it's a genre of film where the plot is the key. This is an espionage film, and you're just not interested in it. And another thing is like they toss it back because this is a spy espionage film in the sense that right now Brad Pitt, he's gone, he's caught. They have to go in and chase him. They have to go in and like get him back. But he had a relationship with Robert Redford that at the time of the movie is on the rocks. So a lot of this movie is told about their relationship in flashbacks. Could be interesting, right? Well, one thing is they go all the way back to Vietnam, and Robert Redford, they didn't even bother trying to age him down, so he still looks old as hell while trying to play this character that is supposed to be much younger. Whereas Brad Pitt, it kind of works. He's still very young at the time, so him and his younger self, it works throughout the movie. You can really cover it up with makeup. Another movie that's just not shot great. It very much looks like a 2001 film, but again, oversaturated images. It works well with some of his other films. With this one, the plot and the story are just not enough to keep you interested. And Spy Game is just one of those movies I truly didn't enjoy, but Brad Pitt and Robert Redford are good enough actors that you're actually still like drawn into just listening to them talk. Robert Redford has always been one of those actors for me where it doesn't matter what he's doing, just him delivering dialogue seems so natural, and especially in a genre like this, it's almost enough. And like I said, it's not his worst film, but it's second to last at this point. It's just there's just not enough there to keep me completely interested. I haven't seen Spy Game in many years. I Where is it? I have it on HD DVD though. Oh my god. Maybe I'll open it up and finally watch it in HD. The HD DVD, keeping that format alive. Yeah, why not? Give it another try. Maybe you'll like it more than me. One thing though, when you watch these movies is when you start to realize when you watch all of his films in such a condensed amount of time, you'll start to notice all the tropes and everything that he likes to put in his movies, just like in the way that the plots are set up and the structures of his films, the way he edits them, the way he works with the same actors. They're all very similar in tone. Obviously there's some outliers, but if you can find that perfect medium, that's where you'll notice that his best films all are very similar. And the ones that don't work, like Domino and Spy Game, kind of go outside of his comfort zone. And really, Domino just feels like something where he was trying to be more in tune with directors and films of the time. And I just don't think that worked at all. He should have just stayed in his lane. Speaking of which, next up, I have Revenge, third to last. And Revenge it's all right. This is the kind of movie I imagine. I wasn't born when this came out in 1990, but I imagine it's the kind of movie that you went to theaters, you saw. Let me see if I can get myself back in this so you can see me and Revenge. But Kevin Costner in 1990, this is only 1 year before he wins Best Director and his film wins Best Picture. This is him right at the perfect. He's the mountaintop. He's probably the biggest A-list actor in Hollywood. He's teaming up with Tony Scott, who he's known for directing some very good movies. But this isn't him teaming up again with Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. So I think that kind of affects the tone of this movie. There's also one big issue is it's Revenge, and the Revenge is a guy who kind of deserves some of the stuff that he gets for what he's actually done. So we're supposed to be rooting for Kevin Costner's character. Kevin Costner, he was a fighter jet pilot at the very beginning. We see it's his last day on the job. Big celebration. He's going back. He's getting out of there. He's gonna go on vacation right after this. He gets invited down to like his buddy's house, like just to hang out with him. He wants to see him again. He's like, all right, come down there. I'll hang out with you. His buddy is also just happens to be one of the biggest like drug dealers. I don't know if he's a drug dealer, just like one of the biggest gangsters in this part of the world. And I guess that doesn't matter. For some reason, they're still really close. Either way, they're really good friends. And his buddies, the guys working under this gangster, don't really like Kevin Costner because he doesn't kiss the guy's ass like they have to do because they work for him, whereas Kevin Costner does not. And, creates some tension. But this guy also happens to be married to a young, beautiful woman that you can see in the poster right here. And Kevin Costner is immediately drawn to her, and she is drawn to him because she's sick and tired of sleeping in the sack with this old bag of bones who clearly just treats her like a trophy wife, although he does seem to genuinely care about her. So it's a weird line there. And Kevin Costner, either way, or that's still your friend. Like, that's supposed to be somebody you truly care about. And you do this to him, you end up starting not only it's not just a one night stand. You're orchestrating an affair with her when this guy's, first of all, big time gangster over here, and you're trying to sleep with his wife and start a side relationship. Well, of course, what happens? Well, he figures it out pretty fast because he ain't an idiot, and that's it. He leaves him for dead in the desert, and he, just because we have to sell that he's the guy that we're getting revenge on, even though, again, Kevin Costner's in the wrong here. He cheated. He basically he knew that his friend was married to this woman and still chose to have an affair with her. Regardless of what kind of man he is, that's still your friend. And you stabbed him in the back. And and now I have to root for you just because they left him in the desert to die and he gets found and they nurse him back to health. But she gets put into a brothel, and not one of the nice brothels. No, this is a dirty, disgusting like brothel that she ends up getting like AIDS there. Like the worst thing that could ever happen to her happens. So she's basically being tortured again, to get us to root for Kevin Costner to save her and get his revenge on this guy. But how could I root for Kevin Costner when he's still a terrible person anyway you spin it? I mean, him and her don't deserve what happens to them, but still, what? He's still a piece of crap. He's still not a good person. I would never do that to any of my friends, stab them in the back like that. So I don't know. The whole movie, right away, the morality issue is always front and center because it's always in the back of your head. But because it's a Tony Scott movie, there's also still a good amount of style. This is kind of one where I think that Ridley Scott, his brother, would have done a better job directing than Tony Scott directing it does. It loses some of the flair that makes a good Tony Scott movie work. It's also based on I think it's a novella, but apparently it's like perfectly shot for that. I haven't read it, so I've only seen the film, so I can't say that. It also has the manager from Major League in it in a pretty good role. He actually does a very good job acting. That's the thing. Everyone does a good enough job. It's just that it feels very empty, and I just again have a hard time rooting for Kevin Costner in this movie. So that's why I have to put that, basically third to last. Let me just check my list to make sure I'm going in order. And the next up, we got The Hunger. And The Hunger is the first film that Tony Scott ever directed from 1983. And it's a vampire film, which is pretty ironic because this movie stars Susan Sarandon, and she looks almost exactly the same as she did when this movie came out 42 years ago. Maybe she is a vampire. Maybe that's what Tony Scott was trying to tell us, because it's incredible how good Susan Sarandon still looks to this very day. She always kind of had like an older person look, so maybe she just aged into herself, but beautiful woman. And it also stars David Bowie, which David Bowie at this time, he was trying acting a lot. Bowie's a good enough actor. I never thought he was like an Academy Award winning actor, but I also never thought he was like a bad actor. The problem with this movie and why I have it so low is this is the definition of just pure style over substance. What frustrates me is it actually raises some good ideas that I would have been interested in the film exploring a little bit more, and it also has a really dumb ending that really spits in the face of the rest of the film, in my opinion. Let's see what Mark's movie. I'm dying to get The Hunger on 4K. And that's the other thing, is this is a beautiful looking movie. I would 100% buy The Hunger on day one on 4K Blu-ray because it really held my attention. Like, and I was interested in it. It's beautifully shot. Like, it has that blue gray look of the time. Think like Terminator, like James Cameron kind of look. The smoky interiors that Tony Scott would be like known for. Like, he had all the style in place of what Tony Scott is most known for. He just didn't have the right film exactly for him, because the plot is very interesting. It, like I said, they're vampires. David Bowie's the lover of, I'm forgetting the main actress's name, but he's the lover of her. And he's young, but all of a sudden he starts to age very, very, very rapidly. And the scene of him aging very rapidly, it's shot in like this smoky interior of a waiting room where he's aging at a very rapid pace. And we leave the camera on him for most of the time, and the makeup looks unbelievable. This is where the style just truly comes into place. There's a lot of long sequences throughout this film. It's just that I would have really liked them to explore that a little bit more. I was so like, that's a whole movie in of itself. And then after that, it does like a 180 and it becomes like a love story between Susan Sarandon and the main actress. And it just does not work on that level. Like that, like those scenes are interesting. They're shot beautifully, like the rest of the film is shot beautifully. It's just I'm not totally in love with the plot. What did let's see what Shamrock Ball said. John, do you rate Tony above Ridley? And yes, David, I do. I do put Tony above Ridley overall. I don't think Tony Scott has a good film as Alien or Blade Runner, but the overall body of work, like Ridley, I think we could all agree, also has some pretty low lows, like a lot of peaks and valleys. Whereas you can, like, Tony Scott's got like that normal bloodline where, ups and downs, but nothing's ever really truly that bad. You can put the only movie I would ever say to Tony Scott, I would say give it a complete pass, is Domino. The rest of them are at least watchable and you'll have a good time with it. Like The Hunger, I had a blast with that, and I have it fourth to last. It's just that I have some problems with how the story takes its turns. There's a scene towards the end, like I was like, that's such a good scene. I want more of that. Instead, we have to like linger on a shot to tell us that somebody lived instead of dying. I don't want to spoil it because I don't know how many people have seen The Hunger, but it's frustrating to the point that even Susan Sarandon herself got really frustrated with the end of this movie. And I think it's a flaw in a lot of Tony Scott movies for some people. Like, he always kind of wants to end the movies on a happy note, and sometimes he's almost bending over backwards to do that. But I appreciate that in a lot of ways, because all of his movies do kind of have a slight lighthearted tone to them, no matter how dark the subject matter is. I think that really does fit into his style. But in a movie like this, maybe this is why he never returned to horror again. A lot of directors get their first feature-length film in the horror genre because they're cheap. And I think for him, horror was just never really his genre. Like, right after this, he makes Top Gun, and that's more in line with a Tony Scott film, whereas The Hunger it's a horror film, and I just don't think necessarily his beautiful style blended so much well with the horror genre. Again, it's still a very good film. It'll look beautiful on 4K Blu-ray. That's kind of one where Arrow Video should come into play, and they'll be perfect with that. Let me see what this says. I agree with you. Style over substance. Mark's movie menu said, yeah. Sometimes that's just it happens, and some movies can nail that down better to where it's a much more. And sometimes if you go too far style, like I think Domino did, then you end up with a bad film. John Doe Juggalos. I need to see more of both of Scott's movies. Yeah, I only one I was missing was Domino. Like I've always been just a big fan of Tony Scott, so I've always seen his films. There's a couple of Ridley Scott's films I haven't seen, but yeah, Ridley Scott, I think for the most part has some films that some great films, phenomenal films, but he also has some pretty bad films in my opinion. And next up after this, and this is one I'm actually pretty excited to talk about. That is Deja Vu from 2006. This one stars Denzel Washington, who he teamed up a lot with, starting with Crimson Tide. But at the end of his career, his last three films actually starred Denzel Washington up until his death. He had Deja Vu, Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 remake, and then his last film, Unstoppable, all starring Denzel Washington. So clearly they had a great working relationship. No matter what movie Denzel's in, he's always good. He's just one of those actors, a lot like Gene Hackman, another actor who Tony Scott worked a couple times with. They're good no matter what the film is. So some of these movies, like Deja Vu, the reason why I have it towards the bottom is it's overall a very interesting movie, but I kind of like the first half of this movie and what they're exploring in that more than like what the second half of the movie kind of became. And it's a little bit out of nowhere kind of love story where it didn't need to have it in there. I think I've seen that before. Deja Vu is a time travel movie, but done in a very interesting, realistic way. Also, Val Kilmer's back with Tony Scott for the first time, I believe, since Top Gun in a good role. In a good role, I think he's pretty interesting, and it's a small role. He's only in again about half the movie. Adam Goldberg is also in this movie, and I kind of always was expecting him to be a dick, and he isn't. He's actually a really nice guy throughout the entire movie. But I was kind of waiting for him to become a stereotypical cocky computer dick. He never becomes that. He's actually nice throughout the entire movie. But basically, the government has this weird technology where they can't travel back in time per se. At least at the beginning of the movie, they can't. They start to unravel the time travel stuff a little bit slowly throughout this movie, but they're able to look back on what happened. And in this case, it's a ferry blows up. It blows up, kills everybody on board, and they're trying to solve the crime by having this where they're able to peek back into the past and try and figure out who the actual person is who blows this up. The thing is, they kind of solve this stuff very fast. And what it actually ends up becoming is a love story between Denzel Washington and a person who is involved in not saying that they're the person who did it, but they are involved in the plot of the movie of this ferry blowing up. And he's never met this person before this, but he sees her through all these camera angles, and that's how he starts to like fall in love with her. And then he tries to figure out a way for him to travel back in time, which they haven't sent a human being back in time yet. But you see how this movie is going to unravel. I just wish that this movie was more of a mystery in the guy who did it, where they kind of solve that really in like the first half of the movie, and then the second half becomes much more of a stereotypical. We're hitting all these time travel tropes and love story tropes, and the ending still kind of got me. And I'm like, that's Tony Scott for you. Even though I didn't love the second half as much as the first half, still liked the bow we got at the very end of this movie. What'd you say, Shamrock Balls? Hated the Pelham remake. Well, let's see where we have that coming up right now. Next on the list, just above Deja Vu, Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 remake. David, I know why you hate this remake, and the original one is so much better than this one. But hear me out. This one does have a couple things working for it. First of all, the plot's pretty much the same in a lot of ways, but the rest of the crew doesn't get as much love as John Travolta, the lead villain of this movie. They try and make it basically a matchup, like a big heavyweight fight between Denzel Washington and John Travolta, these two big time actors. But it has its moments. I liked it, but I haven't seen the original. The original one's a great 1970s film. I'd highly recommend it. Keanu Lorber has a 4K Blu-ray out for that one. No, Joe, on LOL. John, the original is a classic. Yeah. The original one is so much better than this one as far as a film overall goes. But check out the original. Yeah. This one, though, John Travolta clearly knows what kind of movie he's in. He's clearly seen a lot of Tony Scott films, and he knows that Tony Scott likes to make some cheesy movies. So John Travolta, he's done this before. If you've ever seen Broken Arrow, Face Off, those John Woo movies, he's like, I got it. I know exactly what to do. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to turn it up. I'm going to overact my ass off, and I'm going to have an absolute blast as the lead antagonist of this movie against Denzel Washington, who honestly kind of takes a step back, and for the most part and they knew it too because they had to get him out of the desk in the last act. Makes no sense for him to be the guy chasing Travolta down in a one-on-one matchup. What, just so he's redeemed and he gets away with the felony he committed? Like, that's the whole thing. So he's like, I got to do something. I got to be the hero. So he's the one who chases him down. So frustrating about that at the very end. It's good to see. That's the other thing. James Gandolfini is actually great in this movie. Another actor who pops up in a lot of Tony Scott movies, starting all the way back in 1993 with I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on what might be, I'm not gonna, True Romance. Like, he all the way back then, but he pops up Crimson Tide. He pops up in a lot. In this movie, he plays the mayor in a fantastic role, by the way. I just thought he had a lot to sink into in this movie. I just want to check that. Yeah, James was great. Yeah, I really actually felt like and as somebody who lives in New York and I know how like New York mayors get treated like shit. It was fun to see a New York mayor getting treated like crap, but this one does seem to have like he cares about the city. I get that, very very tropey, but I thought James Gandolfini was great. And for a guy who's most known for playing Tony Soprano, it's nice to see him play a much more heroic character, a much more fleshed out character. In this movie, again, with John Travolta just overacting his ass off. But I did love some of those lines. I'm not gonna lie, I got a kick out of him. Just this movie's got a lot of flaws in the movie where it's like, again, bending over backwards to give us the happy ending, where I think it would have been fine if they kind of let him get away. So I'm finding out right now the majority of Tony Scott's films I have are your least liked. Well, I'll explain a little bit more. Taking Pelham 123. My cousin Matt, I know you know Matt Jeff. He swears by it. He likes the remake a lot more than the original, and he will probably put that in his number 1 or 2 Tony Scott films. And you should go after him for that. You remember the original? The mayor had the flu and spent the movie in bed, yeah, which makes, again, they wanted to change some things around, and it's not a 1-for-1 remake. The Taking of Pelham 123 remake, it's definitely a Tony Scott flair on that, whereas the original is much more of a 1970s film through and through. Works just so much better in my opinion. But I still think in the Tony Scott universe, John Travolta's having such a good time. I personally always appreciate overacting, cheesy acting, as long as the film fits it. And Tony Scott's films usually will fit having an overactor in there. Travolta, when he wants to, he can turn that overacting up. I personally think it's great in this movie. I wish Denzel kind of would have met him on that level. I understand why he wouldn't. It's not something that Denzel's really known for doing. Even if he pops up in a cheesy action movie, he's not really the kind of overacting type. He finds his lane, he'll stay in it. Imagine a Tony Scott film of just a guy in bed. There'd be 4 gajillion edits in there. It'd be insane. He'd find some way to find a magic hour shot. That's just how he is. Tony has his ways about him. All right, let's move on from this. I'm sorry we had to talk about it. Here's one that's coming up, and I actually, I didn't show him off yet. But I do have Deja Vu on Blu-ray. This Blu-ray is not good, but it's also very much of the time. I think it would have been a better Blu-ray had the film itself been shot better. But next up, this is a great Blu-ray, and it is The Fan. I actually think The Fan is a very good movie, and it's filled. And this is a perfect day to talk about it. I got the Met hat on. The Mets fucking suck. They lost, but it's opening day in baseball here in the United States. Big day. Excited. Love the Mets. Very excited for baseball. You know who else loved baseball and loved opening day? Robert De Niro in The Fan. So if you've never seen The Fan, well, actually, I guess I have Unstoppable next, or is it The Fan? Nope, it's The Fan. I just don't know why that's on here. But anyway, because I have the Blu-ray for The Fan. So like I was saying, you got The Fan right here. Really cool Blu-ray. Like how they did this with the VHS. Very unique. Starring him and Wesley Snipes. Really, Wesley Snipes at like the peak of his powers. But De Niro, he's this obsessed baseball fan, hence the name The Fan. Wesley Snipes just got traded. Actually, signed a big off-season deal for $40 million. This huge contract that they keep bringing up throughout the movie. That hasn't aged well. Juan Soto just signed a $765 million contract with the Mets. $40 million is nothing. Juan Soto has that walking around. That's some walking around money for him. But in this movie, that's a huge contract for Wesley Snipes. And the biggest San Francisco Giants fan in the world, Robert De Niro, he's hyped for this. That's all he cares about is baseball. It's at the sacrifice of his own son. Clearly, it was the sacrifice of his marriage. It's at the sacrifice of his job selling hunting knives. Never knew that somebody went door to door doing that, but in this movie, that's what Robert De Niro does. And it really creates this opening day stuff where he's got to like balance time. He wants to spend some time with his son. It's his last shot, really, at being a good father. He's a terrible father. He leaves his son at the game so he can go to a sales pitch that he was late for the day before. These are things that are out of it's in his control. Not a smart guy, De Niro, in this movie. But once things start to spiral more and more out of control, he gets more and more obsessed with Wesley Snipes to the point where Wesley Snipes played by Benicio del Toro, in a role that is very much beneath Benicio del Toro's acting chops, in my opinion. He kind of plays a stereotypical Spanish baseball player, even with accent and all, doesn't speak great English. Kind of didn't appreciate how they kind of cast him in this movie. Benicio del Toro is a great actor, but he plays this. He's also wears number 11, which is the number Wesley Snipes wore when he used to play for the Atlanta Braves. So, he's trying to buy the number, do whatever he can to get the number. Ridiculous plot point, because this would have all been sorted out well before day one of the Major League Baseball season. So De Niro decides, you know what? Fuck it. I'll kill. I think his name is Juan. I don't remember his last name. Juan something. Ponyo, I think. It was ridiculous, the last name, regardless. But he ends up killing him. So it becomes this murderous plot movie till eventually it ends up becoming this kidnapping movie. So things start to spiral out of control more and more till we have to end the game. It's a Tony Scott movie, so we're going to end the game in the rain, absolutely, even though the game would be called, but someone's got a gun. So it's a Tony Scott movie, so someone's got a gun, and we're going to do the last pitch. Actually, he's got a knife. That's right, because he sells hunting knives. So, spirals out of control into absolute cheesiness, and you have to really take yourself out of it to believe it. But that's kind of the charm of Tony Scott, and I think that charm is really on full display in this movie. It's very stylistic. It was a box office bomb at the time, but it worked, in my opinion, very, very, very well. I still really had a good time watching it. I get it's not the greatest of movies of all time or anything. It's not a great one in De Niro or Wesley Snipes, like a portfolio of acting, but especially Wesley Snipes. I really feel like he didn't really have enough to show off. It's really more De Niro's movie, and De Niro, he's played this character before. I could see the pitch. Like, come on. You've seen Taxi Driver, right? This guy knows how to deal with mental illness. And this time, they think about it, he's going to kidnap Wesley Snipes' son, even though he's a terrible father to his own son. It's just insane. Even Tony's not so great movies are worth seeing. See, 100%. That's the thing, is like, it's going to look good. Like, it's a very overly stylized movie when you watch it for this kind of plot. Like, everything looks great. Like, the opening shot, like, it's in the magic hour of San Francisco, the sun setting. A lot of this movie kind of takes place in that orange sunset that you've seen a lot of Tony Scott movies take place in. Again, with the rain, it's got a great beach sequence. It's a beautiful looking movie. Like, you see where the money went. It's just that it's another one of those, like, style over substance. The plot, you can just poke a million holes in it, especially if you're a sports fan or a baseball fan. Like, it's one of those where you're like, okay, getting a little out of hand here, Tony. So that's kind of one where I'm a little bit, the styles over the substance there in that case as well. But I still really like that movie. And that does also bring us now to Unstoppable. And Unstoppable, the last film that Tony Scott ever directed. So, it's kind of bittersweet, because it's actually a great movie, and it stars not just Denzel Washington, like I said, but it also stars Chris Pine, really before he got big and famous. And funny story about this one. So my family kind of has this tradition. My parents got divorced in 1996, and my, I don't know if anyone else has divorced parents and knows how this works, but you split time. And on holidays like Thanksgiving, when this movie was coming out in theaters, my dad would get us the day before Thanksgiving, while my mom got us on Thanksgiving. And this tradition still continues to this very day, despite the fact that I'm in my 30s. And even when this movie came out, I was already out of high school. I was kind of living on my own, but it was just kind of cowabunga. What's up, buddy? But, you know, we were going to see this movie. It was a tradition that started all the way back in 1996 or 7. Whenever Flubber came out, that was the first movie we saw for that tradition. So even though I was an adult, I still made sure that I went and saw the movie. Even my wife Faith at the time. Actually, no, we weren't together, but I went and saw this movie. Denzel, Chris Pine, went and saw it with my family. Loved it. Thought it was a great thriller. Really like showing off. Like it kind of felt like a return to form for Tony Scott after a couple movies that felt a little less focused. The plot of this movie is very simple. Got to just stop the train. It's unstoppable. It's right in the title. And you just get Denzel doing Denzel things, Chris Pine doing Chris Pine things. It's got that very stylized shots that Tony Scott for, but it's very, 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 very good. I just absolutely enjoyed Unstoppable. I just really remember mostly though for seeing it with my family. I honestly haven't seen this since I saw it in theaters. I just remember this one being very good at the time. One I got to definitely go back for. I expected this one to get a 4K Blu-ray, so I was pretty surprised that it actually hasn't gotten one yet. And now we're in the top 8, and we're moving on to, got to pull out another Blu-ray here. And a funny story about this Blu-ray, but here I got the Crimson Tide Blu-ray. So I wanted to grab this before we actually did this list. So funny enough, that's why I grabbed it. And I bought it, and I accidentally sent this to Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews house, my channel bankroll member. Didn't mean to send it there, meant to mail to my house. So just let him keep that. And I grabbed my own from Barnes and Noble, where it was like $14, I think. But I wanted to have that. Unstoppable is a mad expensive Blu-ray. Yeah, that's why you'll notice I don't have Unstoppable in here because it's ridiculous how much money that is. And some of these Blu-rays are way too overpriced. And yeah, Crimson Tide is fantastic. That's why it's at number 8. Again, Denzel Washington versus Gene Hackman. The heavyweight fight is between the two of them. One's the captain of the submarine. The other one, he's got 8 more to go. Good, I'm just in time. Yeah, you're making it like at the top of the list because a lot of people might put Crimson Tide pretty high on their list. But for me, the reason why I have it on 8 is I don't think it hits me as emotionally as some of the other movies, despite the great third act in this movie. And when we save the day, of course, the cheering, that's the thing about a good Tony Scott movie. You feel it like in your stomach, and the acting is so good. Gene Hackman, he could just act his ass off. And even if it's a movie he doesn't believe in, like Hoosiers, one of his best films ever, the guy didn't believe in Hoosiers while he was making the film. And now it's talked about as one of his greatest films. So he was, even if he was having a bad time, like the Royal Tenenbaums, he always showed up and was willing to do the job to the best of his ability, and that's why he's a great actor. And he's teaming up here. The other guy on the other side of the ship is Denzel Washington, another one of our all-time great actors, 2-time Academy Award winner as well. And you put these two heavyweights in this movie in the mid-1990s. Denzel, he's still pretty young. And, man, this is handsome Denzel. Gene Hackman looks like how Gene Hackman has looked since Bonnie and Clyde, a little bit old. And in this movie, he's this curmudgeon. He's this guy who he knows what he wants. He needs to get a new number 2, and he hires Denzel Washington, a guy he expects to fall in line behind him like every number 2 should. Support me and what we do. Just, if you have an issue with me, don't bring it up in front of the crew. We'll talk it out. Just always know that you're in line behind me. Think of a great president, a great vice president, great prime minister, and a great, vice prime minister. The guy, he should support everything I say. We got some issues. We'll work it out behind the scenes. But we're in charge of nuclear weapons, so we better be on our best when we're down there. And while they're down there, what happens? Well, they get a message that they are going to be firing off some nuclear missiles during the Cold War. It's finally time. We're going to be shooting those bad boys in the air. The only thing is they get another message that gets cut off right before it finishes. That could have been a rebuttal that would have took back firing off those nuclear missiles, because if you fire them off, shit, now we're going to war no matter what. And it might even be a nuclear holocaust, like the end of civilization. So we better be right about this, right? Well, Gene Hackman sees this a little bit different. He's got his orders and he's going to follow his order. What's up, Kevin? Glad you can make it, buddy. I'm glad to see you here. And that's our channel director, Kevin Kruger. So, in this movie, now at this point, Denzel's like, we have to be right. We have to be sure. Let's finish off the message. Let's make sure that we have our, J's crossed, our J's dotted, our I's dotted, our T's crossed, before we make this decision. We have time. We can do this. And unfortunately, though, Gene Hackman is set in his ways, and he's like, no, we're going to fire those missiles off. And this creates the fight between the two of them to the point where both of them are having each other arrested. And one thing I appreciated no Q&A this weekend. No, Kevin, that's actually why we're doing this today, is because there's no Q&A this Saturday. This next Saturday we'll be back to our regular Q&A schedule. There's another Saturday in April. I also will not be doing a Q&A. I think April 19th. But every other Saturday should have a Q&A show. I think, got to check the schedule. But yeah, that's why we're counting down Crimson. That's, well, we're talking Crimson Tide, but that's why we're counting down all of these movies. You can't arrest me. I'm arresting you. Yeah, all this just arresting each other and basically forcing the entire crew look at their leaders, the guy who's in charge and the guy who's supposed to be underneath them, fighting with each other. It's a bad look as far as leadership goes. Of course, it all works out in the very end because it's a Tony Scott movie. Wow, so glad I remembered that this was happening. Glad you can make it here, Accurate Some Movies. Glad to see you, Sharon. I ended the Q&A show last week, and yeah, once we get David in there, it's over. After your program, I might be going live just to see if it works. If you would like to pop into the chat, yeah, I'll try to. I actually have to make dinner right after this. I'm on a very tight food schedule right now, so I only have a half hour after this is over to eat. But then, yeah, I'll keep my phone open, so at least keep the chat alive and stuff like that. So, but I'm glad you can make it in here. I appreciate that. Accuracy of Movies. Didn't the exact same thing happen on a Russian sub decades ago? I assume that's like something what this is based on. So sorry to arrive late. I didn't get any notifications. Yeah, it's weird how notifications work. Sometimes YouTube doesn't send them out in the best way. But to get back to Crimson Tide, it's just the movie itself. Of course, it's gonna and Jason Robar's in it. As one of the people like at their after they're being court-martialed, after everything breaks down and they're being reprimanded. Everything works out, of course, but we're gonna have to Gene Hackman, you got to step down in honor, of course. And then Denzel Washington, Gene Hackman's like, no, this guy did the right thing. He stood up to me. Give him his own ship. He's the captain now. And I think it all works out in the end, of course. Who sends us all happy? Mr. Baseball or Mr. 3000? Mr. 3000, I absolutely love. You can have some of my popcorn. Yeah, we got plenty more movies to talk about. Yeah, I never get notifications from YouTube. I'll get notifications from like Frank's channel, just as an example, or Jeff's channel. Like 3 days after the video comes out, and I have no idea why. Unless I actually like see it like recommended to me on the YouTube homepage, I won't realize either. And then I'll get like a notification for a video that I've already seen from them, and I'm like, this just doesn't make sense. I've actually messaged YouTube about that, and for some reason, it's just I don't know. They're not great at it. The Last Boy Scout in my top 5. I love to see a movie about Tony Scott and Don Simpson in this era from Top Gun and Days of Thunder. Oh, wait till we get to Days of Thunder. I should have remembered you had said it was going to be today. It's okay. I just appreciate you guys all being here. And then the next one is another Denzel Washington movie, one of the best revenge films of all time from 2004. Kyle Lee Tinkle, who won Question of the Week. I'm going to put that out on Saturday just because there's 2 more days for people to vote. Maybe I'll check it at the end and see where we're at. YouTube seems to work against whatever you really want to be notified about. That's true. For some reason, no matter what, IGN's notifications always go through right on time, but I can never get my own notifications to be on time. But that's why hopefully people can see the on the replay. Oh man, now Man on Fire is in my top 5 Tony Scott films. Yeah, I have it at number 7, so it's still a great one. Used to be a little bit higher. I would actually say this is one I have the Blu-ray as well. I don't know if you guys remember these Best Buy Blu-rays with these slip covers. I have another one for Terminator. I also have it. What was another one that had this? I have a few of these. I really like these slip covers though. At the time, they were unique. We've seen a lot of people rip off this style now, but they were like $5 Blu-rays. But it's got like this glossy finish, and then everything else is a matte back here. So I've always really liked this Blu-ray. Really appreciate those for the time. And again, they were really cheap back then. But Man on Fire, it's a great revenge tale. Denzel gets hired to do a job, protect Dakota Fanning. There's a reason why people still love it when they team back up. And like, what was that movie that came out last year? People were excited to see the two of them. Better director, Tony Scott or Mel Brooks? That's hard. Different genres, though. I love them both, but still, Tony Scott is probably my top 10 directors of all time. Love the guy. Love his style. Really just always have enjoyed his movies. And Man on Fire is one of those movies. Him and Dakota Fanning have great chemistry. Dakota Fanning was an up-and-coming child star. She's still pretty big today. And her sister, same thing, Elle Fanning, great child star as well. Dakota Fanning, I know people hate this movie, but I always liked the movie I Am Sam with her and Sean Penn. Maybe it was just the age I came out, but it really hit me at the time, and I thought I did a pretty good job acting. Dakota Fanning carried her own as a good child star in that movie, just like. But this is her, I think, defining role. Most people probably remember the scene where, because after she gets kidnapped, also Mark Anthony is in this movie and Christopher Walken, just a great stacked cast. And you would, again, just like all Tony Scott movies, you wouldn't expect it. There's just so much in here. Didn't know Tony Dakota Fanning was still a child. Well, now she's not. She's actually, if you guys saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, now about 6 years, like she's in that as well. With a bunch of child stars of the time then who were growing into their own big roles as well. So yeah, Tony Scott could always pull top talent. Yeah, I guess he was just a good guy to work with. But when you get Denzel, Dakota Fanning, and just a stat cast like this, it all works in a very good way. Like I said, this is 1 year before he does Domino, and Domino just does not work as well as this. They have very similar looking styles. It's just he took it too far the next year. Whereas this, it's a very tight, revenge filled, pretty straightforward, with a very sad ending. Actually, this is one of the ones that kind of does end on a bittersweet is the best way to describe the ending to this movie. Yeah. You're so great at getting your opinions and facts out clearly and quickly. Never seen anything like that. I appreciate that. I tried. You know what it is I think it's because I have a vision problem. So I try and keep everything in my head. I had to do it from a child. Like I couldn't like read notes. So all my notes are usually up in my head. So I'm pretty good at memorizing things. So that's the only way I could do it. But obviously I'll bump over my words, and that's where editing comes in. But in this case, when we're doing live shows, I can't be editing, so I got to do it all natural. So hey, I appreciate that compliment. It really does mean a lot to me. Thank you so much. I want to make sure we're moving up. Where are we after that? What's up next? Is it Beverly Hills Cop 2? Let's see. Hold on. I know I'm keeping you guys in suspense, but I got to open. Yep, it is Beverly Hills Cop 2 at number 6. Now, Beverly Hills Cop 2 is not as good as the first one. You don't need glasses? No, I'm wearing contacts. I wear glasses for all the time. The problem is that my eyes are like uncorrectable in certain cases. So like even with glasses and contacts, it doesn't, most people when they put that stuff on, it corrects to 20/20. For me, it corrects only to like, I don't know, like like 400 or 500 over 20. So pretty damn bad. But I'm nearsighted, so if I get really close to things, I can see fine. This has a cracking score. Beverly Hills 2 Cop. Now, David, you're the perfect guy for this because I know that you and me, we've already done Beverly Hills Cop, Martin Brest classic starring Eddie Murphy, one of his most famous films from 1984. And it got a sequel, of course. And it felt like your stereotypical cash grab sequel. You got Don Simpson, Jerry Bruckheimer. They brought in their guy, Tony Scott, to direct it. And we're going to fill up those rooms with smoke no matter where they are. We're going to have this movie in the magic hour. Whereas the first film, a lot of it kind of takes place like it feels like in the middle of the afternoon, like 12, 1 o'clock. This movie feels like it's in the entire time. It's 6:30 at night. Sun setting, it looks absolutely beautiful, and this is one where Tony Scott's style lends itself so well to like the Beverly Hills Cop formula that works so well in the first film. It's just that the plot, it's a little less interesting in comparison to the first film, but you still got Jason Robards back. Actually kind of turns his role up a little bit. He's a little bit funnier in this. What did I say? Jason Robards? I meant Paul Reiser. He's funnier in this movie. But Eddie Murphy's back. As long as you got him banging out all the lines, and you care about him, you care about his relationship with the Haggard and everyone like that. It works. It's gonna work. It does suffer from sequelitis, where you're really just there to see these characters kind of run back the same thing. Because how do you get him back into Beverly Hills? But because he's such a good character, it works very well. Oh, Patrick, hell, John, I am not late. Just finished catching up live from Cannon from Mid Level and Jake from Steelbook Obsessed. I guess you go live every Thursday. No, this is only a one-time thing with Thursday Live. Like, I don't want to step on Ken's live show or Steelbook Obsessed live show. This is one I was kind of expecting more people probably to end up watching on the replay, because it's a subject I imagine people down the line might look up a list, because there's not many best Tony Scott lists, so I thought it'd be cool to rank them. It's just that I couldn't go live on Saturday, Pat, so I figured I'd go live today, just not to rob you guys of another live video. I didn't want to, because a couple weeks ago I didn't have any, so I wanted to make sure I wanted to make sure I do at least 2 live Q&A shows and at least 3 live shows in general per month, just to not. But the only day I could get it in this week was Thursday, just because of my regular job and then running the channel. Things just don't always work out. So I wanted to make sure I gave you guys still a live show. I don't think Beverly Hills Cop 2 has a patch on the original, but it looks and sounds great. It's it's a bit more over the top and not as funny. I think that's the best way to put it, but I think that Tony Scott's style still blends very well into it. And I think that's what kind of makes the movie stand out as far as even in Tony Scott's filmography. I just always used to have such a good time doing a double feature between Beverly Hills Cop 1 and Beverly Hills Cop 2. And I had the triple pack on DVD, and I would never in a million years still watch Beverly Hills Cop 3. Every Beverly Hills Cop film has been directed by somebody else. Eddie Murphy's good in all them. I mean, 3 feels like he phoned it in, but I think everybody did. But 2 still feels like everyone's still trying. It's still the 80s. It's got the 80s Tony Scott style that if you love it, you'll absolutely love it. Why can't you go live on Saturday? I got a family thing. I'm going to my cousin Matt's house every month. That's why I can't do one Saturday a month, because every single month I do this wrestling thing where me, my cousin Matt, we go to his house and we watch a pay-per-view, not a live pay-per-view, but it was a live pay-per-view from the 1990s wrestling. So right now we're doing WrestleMania 1998, WrestleMania 14. So me, him, a couple of our childhood friends, we're all into wrestling, and once a month we all get together, keep our friendship alive, and we go and see each other and get together and watch wrestling together. So that's what we'll be doing this Saturday. So once a month I can't do a Saturday show because that. This is where I fell in love with Bridget Nelson. Yeah, she is beautiful in that movie. Why does your job force you to work so much? You never get a day off? I get days off, but it's not just like having work. I have to do my job to pay my bills. Like, I have a house. I own this house. So I need to unfortunately still work. I wish I didn't have to. YouTube doesn't pay that well. YouTube is still more of my hobby. Like, I wish it was a full-time career, and maybe one day it will be, but unfortunately right now it's not, and they don't pay very well at all. So I have to still work a regular job and pay for my house, and I'm married, I have a wife, I have a couple dogs, so I have responsibilities, and unfortunately that'll always come first before YouTube. I love YouTube. That's why I put out videos as much as I can and make sure I try and do 3 lives a week, but I also have a personal life, so I have to make sure that all has balance, because YouTube can burn you out. I can't do this all the time. I would love to. If it was a full-time job, I would, but that's just not the way it works out. Life is life, right? So do you own all of his movies on Blu-ray? No, I don't own them all, unfortunately. One day. Uh so, oh man, a lot of stuff in the chat. I'm trying to keep going. We gotta hustle. Yeah. Speaking of steelbooks, you guys see today, definitely one day. Hang in there. I appreciate that, buddy. Yeah, it'll happen. I don't want to drag you guys down because we're here to talk about Tony Scott. So what's up next? Let me dive into that, because Beverly Hills Cop 2, I know I really enjoy it. It just fits right into like my kind of style. We just talked about Man on Fire, and now we're at number 5, and that is Enemy of the State. And this is one I wanted to actually grab on Blu-ray, but couldn't, because it was like $15, and I ended up just watching the stream. But Enemy of the State is a fantastic film. I absolutely love Enemy of the State. So where is that image? Right here. This is another one where Gene Hackman teams back up, this time with Will Smith. Will Smith really at the top of his powers at this point. This is when he really couldn't miss. Once Independence Day came out, that was it. He was on the fast track until Wild Wild West dragged him down. But it's a little bit unfair to say that, because I actually am one of those rare people who does like Wild Wild West. But I really love Enemy of the State. And another thing about Tony Scott movies, he was clearly very interested in technology, because it pops up in a lot of his films, and like futuristic technology. In this case, it's not very futuristic now, but GPS technology at the time was very new, state of the art in the late 1990s. And it's just showing what we could do with these satellites, how we track people. Do you want these people having all of your information out there? Probably not, right? But they're able to track you. And in this case, Will Smith accidentally ends up with something that his friend Jason Lee puts in his bag, kind of very similar to the plot of Home Alone 3, actually. Instead of it going into a toy RC car, it goes into like a Game Boy. And he takes this one home, still not realizing it. Happy Almost Friday, Our Life in Horror. Make sure you guys subscribe to Our Life in Horror. They are great. So this movie, just not to get off track on it, but I just want to make sure I answer you guys in the chat, because I really do appreciate it. I blew it. Why because you are a phone call. The lines in this movie are great, but Will Smith just accidentally has his entire life ruined. Regina King's in this movie as well in a small role because, again, everybody who's a big time actor at the time ends up in small roles. Like I said, Jason Lee is in a very small role, dies pretty quick. Jack Black's in this movie. Seth Green. I hate them in this movie because they're ruining Will Smith's life. You know, they once he ends up with this, what they need. And he's like basically gets caught up. And it's funny with Gene Hackman because this is a very similar character to his character in The Conversation. He even has the glasses on and everything like that. Like, you imagine if that guy was older, he'd end up like this, just a weirdo living with his cat all by himself. But you know what? He's safe until Will Smith has to run in there and ruin everything that he's been working for. The common YouTube refrain in the 19 was a dark time for horror, but horror was going very mainstream in the 1990s. That's what made it different. Bram Stoker's Dracula, Cape Fear, Wolf. Yeah, the 1990s does get a bad rep when it does come to horror. Not to get too off track, but yeah, it does get a unfortunate bad rep. A lot of people like myself look at like 1996 as the savior of horror when Scream came out, but there were some movies that came out before that. The Exorcist 3 is a great early 1990s horror film. Cape Fear is another fantastic one from Martin Scorsese. In this case, when Enemy of the State, this is just a great late. Barry Pepper's in this movie as well. Everyone's just got small roles. Jake Busey, all of which is just a cat and mouse game. Like, they're trying to catch Will Smith. Will Smith doesn't realize what he's caught up in it because he's just this hot shot lawyer. Really good at his job too. And that's funny because the ending to this movie is very similar, almost an identical ending to True Romance. The way that the people end up facing off against each other, they don't even realize why they're there, but they're just, you know, got all this bravado that they're not going to let somebody else step in front of them. And that ending is just, it's very, very, to use a word to quote my friend David, it's very class. I was afraid of Sega Game Gear because of this film. Yeah, Sega Game Gear was never bigger than it was in Enemy of the State. They really were trying to sell that. Maybe not putting in a chip like that in there was probably worth it. But it's scary as hell. Like, this movie, the tension in this movie is very, very good, very realistic. And this is where the editing of Tony Scott really works, how they keep cutting between the satellite imaging. It's very kinetic, very fast paced throughout the film. And I think it works. This used to be one of my favorite Tony Scott films. It's still in the top 5. There's a little parts in the beginning where Will Smith's acting is like, it's not the greatest, but Gene Hackman's acting is so good. It just overbalances. I wanted more Gene Hackman in this movie. He really doesn't show up until about halfway through the movie. And then you lose him again for a good amount of time, which gets a little, because he's such a good actor, he draws you. So that would have been interesting. Yeah, I appreciate you guys talking in the chat because I see Tony's here. I love it when Tony shows up. So next up, we're getting into the top 4 guys. So this is really where things start to shine. And next up, I actually have the Blu-ray for this one, which I do want to talk about because the Blu-ray is fantastic. And it's a double pack, so you wouldn't expect it to be that good. But at number 4, I have The Last Boy Scout, starring Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans. Damon Wayans, who never gets enough credit that he deserves. He's actually in a sitcom right now called, I think, Papa's Home or Papa's House or something like that. He's been always a great sitcom actor since, he was on In Living Color in the early 90s. He was on SNL in the 1980s. He's popped up in like I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker, Bulletproof. Like, this guy became a very mainstream, well-known actor, but he never got the credit. And he teams up with Bruce Willis, in 1990, whenever this movie came out, he's at the top of his game. He's still got, thinning, but he's still got some hair. The wig balances it out. Very much a John McClane type character in this movie, except more of a washed up version. The opening scene in this movie is ridiculous and comes out of nowhere. Like, as a huge football fan, of course, it's raining out, like the most muddy game you can ever imagine. It's not the NFL, but it's professional football. Guy, something about gambling. He's like, oh, you better win. So he gets desperate. He does some drugs. He goes out there, and you know what? I'm not getting tackled. So I'll pull out a gun and I'll shoot these guys. And that's what he does. And now that sets off the chain of events for the rest of the movie. Damon Wayans plays a washed up quarterback. He got thrown out of the league for gambling and for drugs. Big plot point of this movie is that gambling is the only thing that's going to save the NFL, or the fake NFL in this movie, in a sense. And it's ironic because they need to bribe some senators to make gambling legal, at least sports gambling legal. Funny enough, sports gambling very legal nowadays in most states and is being promoted heavily throughout every single sport you can imagine. So if only this movie had the knowledge of hindsight, or well, now we have the knowledge of hindsight, but it makes the plot of this movie very out of date, because now that sports gambling is legal, we wouldn't have an entire plot of this movie, so nothing would happen. Uh, Bruce Willis plays a washed up former Secret Service agent, even saved the president, but no one gives a crap about that. So he's still out there, basically heavy drinker now, of course, stereotypical. Damon Wayans, they're both at the same bar at the same time. This girl, I'm trying to think of the actress from this movie. I know she's a big time actress now, but I can't remember. But she ends up getting killed, and the two of them now have to team up and find it. Becomes a buddy comedy movie, a buddy cop comedy movie, even though neither of them are cops now. But it follows all of the same exact plot points and tropes of those movies, with Tony Scott's beautiful style of this movie. Looks absolutely gorgeous, this film. It looked phenomenal on 4K, even though this Blu-ray I was just talking about does still look really good. Even though it's a double pack, it still looks really good. So I love that Blu-ray. Glad I picked that one up. One day, though, that movie should get like the true full Arrow video treatment, where it gets the 4K Blu-ray and the big fat box. I'd kill for that, because this movie is just entertaining as hell. Bruce Willis and Damon Wayans, not the first movie they ever teamed up in, by the way. If you guys have ever seen Look Who's Talking Too, they both voice actors in that movie. So if they team up again in this movie, Damon Wayans playing that washed up quarterback. Some just great, very funny, laugh out loud scenes. And the ending to this movie, in my opinion, works phenomenally. I actually like it, got me emotionally. I loved it. One of my favorite football scenes. I like how this is true real man show the NFL and movies. The movie's also similar to Against All Odds. I recommend them. Thanks, Jeff Bridges and Jeff Woods. I really can recommend this movie. Again, it has an issue that a lot of Tony Scott movies have, that you have to kind of turn your brain off, because there is plot holes galore in this movie, especially when we get in the third act. But I think it works so well, even though it's a cheesy, ridiculous, over-the-top ending. It's almost like Tony Scott's attempt at a noir film in a lot of ways, this movie. But then it's also got that Lethal Weapon kind of tone, which is ironic, because the screenplay is done by Shane Black, who just loves to write these buddy films. I mean, the guy still does it. One of his best films he's ever directed is The Nice Guys, which is a buddy film as well. But Shane Black did the screenplay for this movie. When Tony Scott gets his hands on a good screenplay, he ends up with a film like The Last Boy Scout. But as a sports fan, and Tony Scott's directed a lot of sports films, it gets a little bit frustrated to see that he just clearly doesn't understand the sport. But the movie's just so freaking entertaining. Which brings us down to the top three. And, you guys probably, if you've been watching this channel for any amount of time, you figure out my top three pretty easily. I need to watch The Last Boy Scout again. Mr. Smelly Potato, I'm telling you, you'll love it. Yes, it's very cheesy, but I love that movie. I really like this look back at directors. Freakin' would be a fun one if you were to keep going with this concept. My plan is to keep doing this on, like I was saying earlier, like on the Saturdays where I can't do a Q&A show. I might not be able to do this every month. Like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Like, William Freakin's a good one. I think I might save that one for June, because Sorcerer comes out that month. So maybe we'll do, that's a great one. We'll save that. And that way I don't cram, because it got a little rough watching all these movies. When I had to watch Spy Game and Domino back to back, I gotta be honest, I would have rather been watching anything else when it came to Domino, but for the job, for London, James, for London, James. So yeah, maybe we'll do Freakin', because I love William Freakin', and he's got some, Sorcerer coming to 4K. Good time to grab Bug on 4K. So we'll pencil in William Freakin' for June. That's a fantastic idea. I would also like to do Stanley Kubrick, but I thought this would be really fun as well. And I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. The feedback really helps. I'm glad you guys are having a good time. Book it for June. We're penciling that in. So whatever the Saturday I'm going to miss, we'll pencil that in for Thursday. Again, I don't want to step on mid-level media's live show. But so like maybe I'll put it on a different day, because like I don't want you, because I know when it comes to the physical media community, I don't really want to step on anyone else's toes. Especially like Ken, because Ken's like, he's the big dog around here. He's been around a long time, and I don't want to overstep my boundaries on his live shows and Steelbook Obsessed I want to spread it out so we're all on different days. Like Frank gets Tuesday. So most part, I want to do Saturdays. No one really does lives on Saturdays. So, I'll probably pick a different day, maybe Wednesday. I don't know. I don't want to step on anyone else's toes who's doing lives on other days. So I got to make sure I get my, if anyone can help me out with that. But let's go to number 3, where we got Top Gun. Top Gun's probably his most famous film, I would say. I mean, this is one of the most famous 1980s films of all time. Tom Cruise, this is the one that made him famous. You know, people would argue Risky Business. Risky Business definitely put him on the map. But the one that made him an A-list superstar, can't miss actor of the 1980s, came in 1986 with Top Gun. Great 4K Blu-ray as well. Jerry Bruckheimer, Don Simpson, all of them were made with this movie. This is where the Tony Scott style came to be. Just a great score, great soundtrack. I mean, the score, it's in my permanent playlist. The Top Gun anthem. I probably listen to the Top Gun anthem like at least 3 or 4 times a week. It never stops kicking ass, that guitar. Like I could literally jump through a wall when I hear the Top Gun anthem. I love that. But then the soundtrack, the Kenny Loggins soundtrack is unbelievable. Like just I appreciate you saying that. I really do, actors and movies, but I you know, I don't like to to put myself above people. I love the community itself, and I think we should all support each other. There's one channel out there that I'm not even going to use their name that I absolutely hate, but somebody who's out there like putting a black eye on the entire physical media community. But in general, back to Top Gun, one of the best films of the 1980s. I mean, it's a masterpiece in my opinion. It's got its flaws. Like these top 3 films, I can go back and forth. The jig scene, I love that. Is he doing the jig? That's what I mean. A scene like that in The Last Boy Scout shouldn't work as well as it does. It shouldn't make me emotional, but yet it does. It just, it's manipulation of your emotions, but it works so well. So it does, and that all works so well in this movie. I mean, Anthony Edwards as Goose. How many people have said, "Talk to me, Goose"? I mean, I used to work with a guy, this guy Chuck, Charlie. He used to, you can call him whatever you want. Either way, or it's Charlie. His name's probably Charles, but he always used to say, "Talk to me, Goose," every time he needed something from me. And he'd be like, "Hey, talk to me, Goose." So I'm sure I'm not the only one who's had that experience, but it all circles back to this classic of the 1980s, a shining example of what 1980s filmmaking was. It's just a movie that just kicks ass. Like you have a great time watching it. It's entertaining. Think about all this is where your Tony Scott's cheese comes into play. Think about this. They're holding class in the what do they call that where they house the planes? Whatever they call that. They're having class there, not in a classroom. The smoke-filled classrooms whenever they're in the classroom, still every smoke-filled interiors. Val Kilmer, "I don't like you because you're dangerous." Like talking through his teeth, like who the hell does it? He's just that mad. Like you're dangerous when you're up there. But then of course the death scene is sometimes I see people criticize the choice of Kelly McGillicuddy, but I thought she was perfect, attractive, and smart. I actually think Kelly McGillicuddy is great. The flaw is her relationship with Tom Cruise, but that's more of a hanger. That's what I was looking for. The word hanger. Yeah, airplane hanger. I don't know why I couldn't pull hanger. It's like not being able to pull hat. But Top Gun. Yeah, they're holding class there. She's great, Kelly McGillicuddy. I love her. Tom Cruise never really has great chemistry with women. It just seems to be a Tom Cruise flaw when it comes to a lot of his movies. Even in Top Gun Maverick, there's no real sex scene in that. I also love the little tidbit about the fact when they're in the elevator later in the movie, that scene, they really needed that, but they had both already gone on to shooting other movies. That's why she's wearing a hat. And if you look at Maverick's hair, it's much longer because he's already in The Color of Money hair. Just love that little fun fact about the movie because I love fun facts. The Dolby Atmos is awesome. Yeah, between this and Maverick, very immersive. The fighter pilot scenes are fantastic, nerve-wracking, and it's all just, they're using a lot of the same footage over just in different ways, unlike, Top Gun Maverick, but it's all done beautifully. It's edited together perfectly. It's even got the quick pacing, quick editing. And then, of course, the volleyball scene. How playing with the boys. Yeah, I mean, it's classic stuff that they tried to replicate in Maverick. It all works great. Great ending, even when he's married to them. Yeah, well, that's another problem. Guy is not a good husband. We'll talk about his other wife in a little while. The soundtrack is ace. Absolutely. Tom Ace. I love the soundtrack. If you like footage of fighter jets and naval carriers, check out The Final Countdown. It's weird, but oddly fun. I enjoy Oddly Fun, so maybe I will check that one out. I mean, fighter pilot stuff. That's why at the beginning of Revenge, like from his 1990 film, it's like a tease. He's got the fighter pilot. Kevin Costner's perfect at that. It's not like he hasn't played a naval pilot before. Well, he was a Navy, wasn't a pilot in No Way Out. He thought we were gonna get more of that. Then it turns into a whole different thing. But how do you not love Top Gun? Maybe he takes his relationship advice from Scientologists. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's exactly where he's getting his advice from. Obviously, he did something with Scientology. He looks like he's 40 when he's like 70. And that brings us to number 2. And I know, Days of Thunder. This one's very special to me. Has it been called Top Gun on wheels? Top Gun with race cars? Yes, it has. Is that all true? 100%. It is absolutely that. It's just basically a remake of that. It seemed like he's a worse father than husband. He's a horrible father, Tom Cruise. I unabashedly love Tom Cruise, the actor. His personal life, he jumped on Oprah's couch. He's a weird guy. Not going to sit here and pretend he's not. I just still love his films. I think he's a great actor, and he throws himself into his roles, and he's willing to risk his life for it. So, as a film fan, I appreciate what he does, even though he definitely doesn't seem like the greatest guy in the world. Tom, he's I know you'd love that, David. I did that for you. Shame to say I've never seen Days of Thunder. You got to fix that. And if you're 4K Blu-ray, I always put this at number 1. There's a list on the channel, the top 10 most underrated 4K Blu-rays. I just got upgraded my audio system. I'll do a review for that this week, guys. I just had to spend a couple weeks for it. One of the first things I tested out was Days of Thunder on 4K Blu-ray because not only does it look beautiful, but it is an Dolby Atmos track. It's a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1. But it's a damn good one. Race cars have never sounded so good. It's a NASCAR movie. I am a huge NASCAR fan. I actually like Days of Thunder because I was a NASCAR fan. And as a NASCAR fan, is this movie accurate to NASCAR? Another flaw. No, it gets very frustrating sometimes being a NASCAR fan and seeing what happens in this movie because it's absolutely 110% impossible. But you got to buy in. Robert Duvall. I just heard this last week, and it makes sense about the timeline. He chose to do this movie, Days of Thunder, with Tony Scott, over going to do The Godfather Part 3 with Francis Ford Coppola, the guy who made him famous. So, pretty weird, but hey, that just shows you he truly believed in this movie. The scenes where they reveal the car and start carving up the car, and Robert Duvall is in the bar, and the car is so magical. It is. The score, the Hans Zimmer score they got playing. Hans Zimmer, another guy who's apparently ashamed of this score. I love the score to this movie. I think it's one of my favorite synthesizer heavy scores. It's very inspirational. The opening credits with that, and then of course, great soundtrack like "Give Me Some Lovin'." It's all done. It's all great. Harry, I'm dropping the hammer. The whole montage scene, it all works. Of course, then that's when things start to bother me. He's never driven a NASCAR before. Now he's an elite stock car driver, and he wins 6 races in a row before we get to the halfway point of the NASCAR season. As a NASCAR fan, to give you an example, the most wins by a NASCAR rookie all time is 3, done by a couple different drivers. For the most part, rookies don't even win in their first years, and you go through like the minor league seasons before you get to that. This guy was just an open car driver. Should they make Top Gun Iceman spinoff in 91 or 90? They should have. I would have loved that. But they didn't. You seen that doc about Paul Newman's racing career? I have, and it's very fascinating. He did a racing movie too. The opening scenes in Talladega are some of the best ever. Everything about the movie is terrific. Yeah, it's just a beautifully. They shot this in Daytona and Charlotte, North Carolina during the season. The cars are provided by Hendrick Motorsports, actually, another huge team, still big in NASCAR to this very, very day. So that's fascinating. But I've always, as a huge NASCAR fan, it's always cool to see that City Chevrolet, the first sponsor that he has, that Robert Duvall, who's modeled after Rick Hendrick. City Chevrolet is owned by Rick Hendrick. The Cole Trickles, mainly modeled after Tim Richmond, who has a great documentary. You guys should watch this Tim Richmond documentary if you have any interest. Like, this guy was like the rock star of NASCAR in the 1980s. He tragically passed away from AIDS, like in and NASCAR like railroad the guy. It's a tragic documentary, tragic story. But the rock star lifestyle, that's exactly what Tom Cruise's Cole Trickle is modeled after. And also, if you're a fan of Talladega Nights, John C. Reilly's in this and Talladega Nights, so he's got 2 NASCAR movies under his belt. cheesy scenes like the wheelchair racing scene, the rental car scene, all of this stuff, absolutely ridiculous. The beautiful racing scenes, though, that's where they spent all this. But Paramount was pissed. They spent so much money. They apparently even spent money on a gym, a personal gym in the hotel. Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer, they were out of control. Reshoots, scripts not done. Paramount, they had a deal, a 3-film deal that they apparently terminated right after Days of Thunder because all the money they spent on it. Even though the movie was a hit, they spent way too much money on it. But I think the results speak for themselves. Days of Thunder is a one of a kind film. I've always enjoyed it. I'll defend it as much as I possibly can. I've always have loved this film. I've always enjoyed every time I rewatch it. It's got your classic Tony Scott happy ending there. We even got to throw a freeze frame on it. If you're a big fan of cheesy, sloppy movies like this, I think this is probably the best of them. It's one of the greatest sports films of all time. I think the score itself is fantastic. Hans Zimmer should be more appreciative. Is more interesting than Maverick. Pete, I agree. He is more interesting. Also, this is where he met Nicole Kidman, who is clearly a lot taller than him in this movie, which is always very funny to see. I know it bothers Tom Cruise too. But Tom Cruise, I mean, his hair is flowing. He looks like a real guy in this movie. And I think he plays a race car driver very, very, very well. It'll always be one of my all-time favorite movies. Is it a cinematic masterpiece? Absolutely not, but I don't care. Sometimes we all have those films that are just cheesy, but the nostalgia is enough to overpower it. And then, of course, if you're a fan of 80s films, despite this movie coming out in the very early 1990s, 1990, it sure does feel like it came out in the 80s, and I loved every second of it. Which, of course, means we're winding down this list because we're just about at number 1. The Fox Sports 4-hour documentary about the movie is good. Tony Scott's wife is in a lot, but she was barely there. But other than that, there's a lot of interesting things regarding Don Simpson. Yeah, Don Simpson is crazy, guys. Like, I mean, you look up what Don Simpson does. His life, if you just know him from being the other guy on the side of Jerry Bruckheimer, the guy passed away in 1996, had a huge drug problem. He brought in a guy to help him get off drugs. He brought a guy to live with him, come in his house and stay with him. His drug problem was just so out of hand. The guy who came in to help him died of a drug overdose in his scene, like in his house. I mean, that is crazy. The car barred scene is like the creation of Frankenstein, but the score is rousing in that scene, and I love when they build out that car. It's beautiful. It really is how he's talking to that's a scene you can go back to. The score matches it perfectly. It's truly a beautiful scene. That barn, another fascinating fun fact, is how that's the barn they scouted. Then they spent money to build a barn for the movie. They didn't like it, so they tore it down, rebuilt the barn, another new barn, didn't like that again, and just went back to the first barn they saw. It's crazy to me with Don Simpson. Don Simpson is an absolute, like, he's a legend, though. Gotta admit, guy's an absolute legend. And then, of course, number 1, it's in my top 10 favorite films of all time, or at least top 15 at this point, and that is True Romance from 1993. And like I was talking about, if Tony Scott can get a good screenplay under his belt, he'll end up with a great film. And of course, that great film, the screenplay was done by Mr. Quentin Tarantino, my favorite director of all time, and I think it worked really, really, really well, in my opinion. I mean, I understand that they changed the ending around. Quentin Tarantino's not too big of a fan that they went with the happier ending. That's Tony Scott for you. He's always going to have the happier ending. It's just what he does. And I think it works. I like the happier ending. I like the voiceover done by Patricia Arquette. I think that the Alabama voiceover describing how everything worked out, I think it works very well. All the narration in this movie works very well. The score itself is phenomenal. Again, done by Hans Zimmer. The score, though, it's a complete rip-off score. I'm sure it's intentional, though, because it's basically just Badlands score all over again. That it's the exact same score. The plot's very similar to Badlands as well. Obviously these two people on the run, and who have crimes that they've committed, but it's much more happier and lighter than Badlands, and their crimes are a little bit more justifiable because, Clarence only killed a pimp, a horrible, horrible piece of shit pimp at that, who probably deserved to die. One thing, Tony Scott will always try and bend over backwards to make our heroes seem like heroes, even if they've done some bad things. This movie is something that's done that as well. So very similar to Martin Sheen and Badlands and everything like that. Wow, that Barn Ahart is crazy. Yes, Ted Simpson wanted to play one of the race car drivers as he was producing. He had auditioned over and over. Yeah, he actually auditioned for the role. It's insane to me. Tarantino really knows how to end a movie. Tony Scott should have listened to him. Didn't care for Elvis. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I'm happy with the ending, but I also do agree the darker ending probably would have made more sense, and you can see why. I always wonder if Tarantino and Scott really have done a dozen or more movie bangers. They complement each other very well. Tony Scott's dialogue and Scott's vision, Tarantino's dialogue and Scott's vision. I think that's exactly why I love this movie, because it does have that great dialogue. The dialogue with Christopher Walken and that one scene, him and Dennis Hopper, just dialogue driven screen. Of course, there's smoking in there. At least they're smoking to justify the smoke, but it's well lit. Just two actors acting their asses off. Ano y mano. The Tony Scott, but if that wasn't written down by Quentin Tarantino, we probably wouldn't have this great iconic scene. I haven't killed anybody in 8 years. One, it's definitely Christian Slater's best movie in my opinion. Was on Last Boy Scout Scat. Yeah, see, so at least they had some relationships. I know that like Tarantino sold 2 scripts. He sold this and this and Natural Born Killers. He didn't love what Oliver Stone did to Natural Born Killers. He was, not as angry at this because it's really just the ending that he changed around. And again, the ending is also very, very similar to the ending to Enemy of the State, where we have these two big, two sides. We got the mob who's been hunting down the coke. Another James Gandolfini scene in this movie. That scene's hard to watch when him and Patricia Arquette, like, it's always hard for me to see somebody get thrown through the glass and get cut up and bloody like that, and the water running. Oh man, that's a very tough one to watch. Obviously, and I always think of like when he punches her in the face, that look that like Gandolfini gets, so he like looks up real quick, like, and he like bites his lip. Just an iconic scene as well. I mean, it's also just very, very disturbing. The score is another one that I'll always go back and listen to. It's one of my favorite scores. I know I said that already. Got a great soundtrack. Aerosmith. I think this has the same exact. This and Ace Ventura feature the same song, if I'm correct, from Aerosmith. I can't remember what the name is, but great Aerosmith score. So it's got a great soundtrack. Brad Pitt's in this movie as what's his name? Floyd, which is, he's roommates with Michael Rappaport. The two of them have great back and forth as well. It's just a fantastic movie. Chris Penn is great. R.I.P. Chris Penn. One year after he was in Reservoir Dogs, he's just another great one. Tom Sizemore is his partner in this movie. Just great actors, just in small roles. I always believe Tony learned from his brother. I feel like really put himself into the corner at the end of Thelma and Louise unusual editing. I actually truly have always thought that. I always thought Thelma and Louise was the most Tony Scott, Ridley Scott movie. I felt with the way the style was of Thelma and Louise, which is why Thelma and Louise is my 3rd favorite Tony Scott movie. I love the style of that movie. It always did feel like that. And honestly, if I remember right, after Ridley Scott did an interview after Tony Scott had passed away, and I guess Tony Scott was in a bad way, and Ridley Scott was trying to like hype him up, like, let's go make another movie. Come on, you got another movie to make. Let's get it, And that kind of makes sense, getting like kind of into the mindset of Tony and Ridley Scott. The both of them always kept making movies. Like Tony Scott, his first film came out in 1983, his last one in 2010. He put out 16 theatrically released films, even a couple in the same year. Ridley Scott still puts out a ton of movies. Multiple times he's put out multiple films in the same year. So these guys, you can just clearly see that they love filmmaking. And Ridley Scott's 7 years older than Tony Scott, so I imagine it's the little brother looking up to the big brother. I want to do that too. But Tony Scott did have his own distinct style, and obviously he dabbled around and was the best when he was in, genre action films. But I always felt like it's very similar to Ridley Scott, where they're at the mercy of the script. Like the screenplay has to be good, like Blade Runner or Alien. But they always are, they're visionaries. But sometimes I always feel like Ridley Scott just fumbled the ball way harder than like Ridley Scott did, in my opinion, at least. If Christian Play didn't play the role, would you have liked Val Kilmer too? Val Kilmer's actually in the movie. So that's pretty funny. He's the voice of is it he is, right? Yeah, he's the voice of Elvis in this movie. Anytime you see Elvis, that's Val Kilmer. I always right? Yeah, because Kurt Russell's the one in Forrest Gump. I always get mixed up which one's Kurt Russell and which one's Val Kilmer. Kurt Russell's the Elvis in Forrest Gump. The ones you can never make out clearly. But Val Kilmer, he does a good job. I always love him in the background. This is also right around the time where he was doing the Doors, so it's always fun to see him pop up like that as well. Great comment about the scripts and material really is great, but man, he gives some top shelf papers. Yeah, he does. I love Ridley though. I'm gonna do that one day, but that's another one where he has a lot to tackle. I would love to do Ridley Scott one day. I heard Tony Scott wanted Drew Barrymore for the would have been interesting. Honestly, I could see it. Patricia Arquette would like that's a heavy accent that she puts on, but she's so cute. I could definitely see Drew Barrymore in that role as well, especially at that time. She's a very cute actress, and I feel like she could do that accent because she's kind of has that accent, not quite, but naturally. If you ever seen like The Wedding Singer and stuff like that, I can 100% see Drew Barrymore in that role. I did not know that though. I really do appreciate that. Told them he wanted Val to play Elvis instead of the main role, and Val was probably like, "Fuck it, all right, I played Elvis and Jim Morrison." Not too many people. I'm sure he's the only one who could say that. Funny enough. Real quick. While I'm here, I guess I'll take a look at see who won the question of the week to see if it's like a big blowaway or anything like that. And then we'll get out of here. I really hope you guys enjoyed this show. I'm definitely going to be doing more of this. It was a great time. I had a blast talking with you guys. I appreciate you guys showing up. So right now, yeah, there's no way it's going to change. So 61%. For number one, what is your favorite childhood memory? I'm trying to remember who asked that question, so let me go in and look. But whoever asked, what is your favorite childhood memory for me and David, that is clear and away 68% runaway winner. Oh, that was Mr. Smelly Potato. So Mr. Smelly Potato wins. Our channel bankroll member. Thank you guys all so much for showing up. I really do appreciate it, boys and girls. Thank you guys all so much. Kurt Russell played episode and John Carpenter. Yeah, he did. So he played Elvis twice, actually. Will Duke win tonight? We'll have to wait and see. Mets didn't win. They let me down. That's for freaking sure. So I got at least March Madness I can shift to. I do have some fantasy players playing though. Right now, the Dodgers and Tigers are playing, and I have Scooble in my fantasy team. Hopefully, he does better. I had what's his name on the Brewers playing today. He had 5 strikeouts. My catcher, I drafted in the 3rd round, had 5 strikeouts. So not doing so well there. Mr. Smelly Potato, good night, man. You want a digital code, Mr. Smelly Potato, so message me anytime. And I also got to ask you for your bankroll director's review for the month of April, because I got to do that video pretty early next month. Because for anyone, just a quick heads up for April, if you're wondering how the channel's going to be, the end of April is very expensive, so there's going to be a ton of 4K Blu-rays reviews coming out after April 15th. Before April 15th, we'll have some fun. I'm going to do a review for Sonos and the Arc Ultra and everything in their whole system. I'm going to do a review for Galaxy Quest on 4K Blu-ray. That's going to be coming up as well in the next couple. And that's going to be a video for next week. And also inspired by Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews, I'm going to be doing my top 10 favorite pieces in my collection. So that's going to be next week's video. So just in preparation for the end of this month with the amount of 4K Blu-ray reviews coming out. The first couple of weeks will just be some fun videos, the director reviews, and everything like that. I'll send you that soon. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Smelly Potato. I'll send you a code, or if you want some of the movies that are coming to 4K Blu-ray, you want a code for one of those that are coming up in the next few weeks, we can work that out as well. But I want to thank you guys all for being here. I really, truly appreciate it. I had a blast, as I expected to. We'll be doing William Friedkin in June. That's on the calendar, so we'll be getting cracking on that. Can't wait. Love your shells. I think I said that you built them with your father-in-law, unless I'm tripping. Not my father-in-law, but my cousin Matt. He built those shelves. Him and his dad built them. So the two of them, they built it at Matt's house, and they actually put it into the wall. So it's actually built onto the wall itself. So you can actually take them if you're moving or something like that, because they are beautifully well handcrafted. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if you guys can tell, but running out of space there. So within the next year and a half, I don't know. I might get something that goes under the window here, because it's hard to tell, but this room is very, very, very small. So I don't know what I'm going to do. And I know if I end up in the living room, I'm going to be in my wife's going to get pretty mad. But right now, I think I'm going to have to shift left and go underneath for a while. And maybe that'll buy me like another year and a half, hopefully. but we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, that's going to do it here, guys. Good night again. And again, thank you guys all so much. I truly appreciate the support, and I hope you guys enjoyed this.